The sound of splintering wood shattered the night. It wasn't a dream, it wasn't a memory from Afghanistan or Iraq, it was John Miller's front door exploding off its hinges at 2 in the morning. The retired Navy SEAL sat frozen for a split second, instincts firing, muscles remembering countless raids he had led overseas. But this time, the target wasn't a terrorist compound or drug den. It was his own small suburban home in Virginia. Men in black tactical gear stormed in, helmets, body armor, flashlights cutting through the dark. Their uniforms weren't military or police. Instead, they bore bright patches reading HOA Enforcement Division. Compliance check, one shouted as 2 others grabbed his flagpole outside and yanked it from the ground. His dog, Ranger, a German shepherd who had been by John's side since retirement, barked frantically. The men shouted threats of fines, accusations of unauthorized property modifications, and complaints about noise violations. By the time they left, his front door was destroyed, his house was trashed, and his service dog was trembling in the corner. The neighborhood was silent. Lights flickered on in a few windows, but no one dared step outside. John stood in the wreckage, fists clenched. He had fought in deserts and jungles, bled for freedom, buried brothers who never came home. And now a group of overzealous HOA enforcers had violated that very freedom on his own soil. But John didn't yell. He didn't fight back. He simply whispered to himself, if they can do this to me, what chance does anyone else here have? The next morning, John tried to talk to his neighbors. Mrs. Henderson, an 80-year-old widow across the street, cracked her door open just enough to whisper, "John, don't push them. They fined me $500 last year because my grandson parked in the driveway overnight. If you fight them, they'll take your home." Another neighbor, a young single mother named Elena, avoided eye contact. Later, she confessed in tears that she had been forced to pay thousands in maintenance fees for things that were never repaired. The HOA wasn't just enforcing rules, it was running a kingdom of fear. They threatened foreclosure, harassed homeowners with bogus fines, and even employed their own enforcement officers to intimidate residents. John's anger simmered. This wasn't about him anymore. This was about a community under siege. That night, John sat at his kitchen table with Ranger curled at his feet. He scrolled through old contacts on his phone, names he hadn't dialed in years. Men he had fought beside. Men who had seen the worst of humanity and still stood strong. He hesitated for a moment, then pressed call. "Marcus here," a gruff voice answered. "Brother," John said, his voice steady but heavy, "I need you." Within 48 hours, 5 men arrived at his doorstep. Marcus, his former team leader, still built like a tank but with streaks of gray in his beard. Kyle, the sniper with an eye like an eagle, now a quiet family man. Ben, the medic who once saved John's life in a firefight, carrying the calm presence of a healer. Then there was Rico, the joker of the team, but deadly serious when it mattered. And finally, Davis, the youngest of the crew, who had struggled the hardest to adjust to civilian life. When they gathered in John's living room, the atmosphere was thick with old brotherhood. No one asked for details right away. They knew by the tone of John's call that this wasn't casual. John laid it out. The smashed door. The threats. The fear that had spread like wildfire in his neighborhood. He expected outrage, maybe laughter at the absurdity of HOA cops. Instead, the room went silent. Marcus finally spoke, "If they came for you, they'll keep coming. Let's handle this." They didn't rush into it. These weren't hot-headed kids. They were disciplined warriors. For days, they studied the HOA. Kyle dug into the financial records. What he found was staggering: thousands of dollars unaccounted for, suspicious maintenance contracts, and evidence of embezzlement. Ben walked door to door, listening to neighbors' stories. Elderly residents, single parents, and veterans all had tales of harassment and intimidation. Some even feared losing their homes because of fraudulent fines. Davis, who had struggled with PTSD since leaving the SEALs, found a new purpose. All this time, he told John one night, "I thought I was done fighting. But maybe I just needed to fight for the right people." Together, they mapped out the HOA's entire operation. Not to destroy it, but to expose it. The showdown at HQ. The day came. The 6 men didn't show up in camouflage or with weapons. They walked into the HOA headquarters in suits, calm, professional, but radiating authority. Inside, a group of smug officials lounged at a long conference table. The HOA president, a man named Robert Langston, smirked when he saw John. "Back again, Mr. Miller? Still upset about your door?" John didn't flinch. He set a splintered piece of his broken front door on the table with a loud thunk. "You broke into my home," he said quietly. "And you've been breaking this community for years." The officials laughed, until Marcus laid down a binder full of documents. Bank records, testimonies, photographic evidence. Kyle had even pulled drone footage showing HOA enforcers illegally harassing residents. Marcus leaned forward. "We're not here to argue. We're here to give you a choice. Step down and return what you've stolen, or this evidence goes to the press, the courts, and the state attorney general." The room fell silent. Langston's smirk faded. His hands trembled. He knew they weren't bluffing. Over the next weeks, the corrupt board members resigned one by one. Investigations opened. The enforcement officers vanished when lawsuits started piling up. The neighbors who once hid behind curtains began stepping outside, standing together. Mrs. Henderson finally planted roses in her front yard without fear of fines. Elena's driveway stayed full of her son's friends' cars, no longer policed. For the first time, the community felt free. John's Seal brothers stayed for a while, helping rebuild not just his front door, but the spirit of the entire neighborhood. They held barbecues, fixed fences, and taught kids how to play ball in the street without fear of HOA officers barking at them. One evening, as the sun dipped low, John sat on his porch with Ranger resting beside him. His brothers laughed in the yard with the kids. The neighborhood was alive again. John turned to Marcus and said, "Funny, we thought the fight was over when we came home. But maybe the hardest battles are the ones we fight right here, for the people we love." Marcus nodded, eyes soft. "The enemy changes, brother. But the mission stays the same: protect and serve." The story spread beyond the neighborhood. Local news picked it up. Veterans around the country felt inspired. And ordinary people, tired of corruption in their own communities, found courage to stand up. What started with a smashed door became something bigger, a reminder that courage, unity, and integrity could rebuild not just homes, but hope. John had once fought for freedom overseas. Now, he had fought for it at home, and in doing so, he and his brothers had given it back to an entire community. Sometimes the real battles don't involve bullets or foreign soil. They happen in our own neighborhoods, in the quiet places where people are too afraid to speak up. And sometimes, all it takes is one man, and his brothers, to remind everyone that freedom isn't given. It's defended, every single day.